30,000 years ago, a human is walking through a forest. They stop. On the ground in front of them, a wolf, leg broken, unable to move. The wolf looks up, the human looks down. What happens next tells us something about who we were, and maybe who we still are. Most people assume the answer is obvious. They're wrong. We tend to think of ancient humans as purely practical creatures, survival first, everything else second. So when most people imagine what happened when a prehistoric human found an injured animal, they picture two options. Either they ate it, or they walked away. But archaeologists have been finding evidence for decades that tells a completely different story, and it changes how we understand the origins of human empathy, medicine, and even our relationship with animals today. Let's start with what seems logical. An injured animal is easy prey, vulnerable, can't run. For a hunter-gatherer group that might go days without food, stumbling across a wounded deer or boar should have been a straightforward decision. Kill it, eat it, and yes, sometimes that's exactly what happened. But here's what the bones tell us. When archaeologists excavate ancient campsites and settlements, they regularly find animal remains with healed fractures, not fresh breaks, healed ones. A healed fracture means the animal survived the injury. It lived long enough for the bone to grow back together. And in the wild, a severely injured animal almost never survives alone. Something or someone had to help it. One of the most striking examples comes from a site in Germany. Roughly 14,000 years old, researchers found the remains of a dog, one of the earliest domesticated dogs ever discovered, with severe bone damage consistent with a serious illness called canine distemper. This disease causes muscle weakness so severe the animal cannot walk or feed itself. The dog would have needed weeks of care to survive, and survive it did. The bones show clear signs of recovery. Someone fed this animal. Someone stayed with it 14,000 years ago. This wasn't a wolf kept as a tool. This was an animal someone chose not to abandon when it became useless. And it's not an isolated case. At sites across Europe and the Middle East, researchers have found the bones of deer, goats, and wild boar, with healed injuries that would have required extended recovery, injuries too severe for the animal to have survived alone in the wild. A study published in the Journal of World Prehistory found that in multiple Neolithic settlements, a surprising percentage of animal remains showed signs of healed trauma. These weren't animals kept just for meat. They were animals that had been kept through a period when they produced nothing, no milk, no labor, no food. They were kept simply because they were alive. Now here's where it gets deeper. Because the same sites that show evidence of animal care also show something else entirely. Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, showed almost identical behavior toward their own injured group members. A Neanderthal skeleton found in Shanidar Cave in Iraq showed a man who had lived for years with a withered arm, damaged legs, and limited vision. He could not have hunted. He could not have gathered food effectively. He survived because others fed him. Others protected him for years. What this tells us is that the impulse to care for a wounded creature, whether human or animal, is not a modern invention. It is ancient. It may even predate our species. When a prehistoric human found an injured animal, many of them didn't just see prey. They saw something that was suffering, and they responded to it. The question researchers now ask is why? The most compelling explanation comes from evolutionary biology. Caring for injured animals likely began for practical reasons. A wolf with a broken leg that you nursed back to health might stay near your camp. It might help alert you to danger, help you hunt. Early humans who kept injured animals and nursed them back to health may have accidentally begun the process of domestication. The dog, the goat, the pig, all of our domesticated animals may trace their origins back to injured wild animals that a human chose not to kill. But something more complicated was also happening. Researchers who study ancient empathy suggest that caring for a wounded creature also had a psychological function. It reinforced social bonds within the group. When you watch someone care for an injured animal, especially a child watching a parent, it teaches something. It teaches that a living thing in pain deserves attention. That lesson, repeated across thousands of generations, may be one of the foundations of human civilization. There's also evidence that ancient humans developed something resembling basic veterinary knowledge. At several Neolithic sites, researchers have found animal bones with deliberate cuts around fracture points. Not butchering cuts, but precise incisions that suggest an attempt to clean or set a wound. The tools found nearby match tools also used for human medicine at the time. They were applying the same care to animals that they applied to themselves. We don't know if they understood infection or bone healing the way we do today, but they understood that doing something, cleaning a wound, splinting a limb, providing food and water, gave the animal a better chance of survival. That is proto-medicine applied to another species 30,000 years ago. Here's what makes this genuinely strange to think about. The first time a human ever helped an injured animal, they had no word for compassion, no concept of veterinary medicine, no philosophical framework about the value of life. They just saw something hurt and they stayed. That instinct to pause when you encounter suffering, to not simply walk away, is one of the oldest things about us. It predates language, it predates agriculture, it predates everything we typically point to as civilization. And every time a modern human rushes an injured bird to an animal shelter or spends money they don't have on veterinary bills for a sick dog, they are doing something ancient humans recognized 30,000 years ago. They are doing something that has always been part of what we are. Ancient humans didn't have a word for kindness, but the bones don't lie. They helped anyway. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Not the tools, not the fire, not the language, but the choice, made again and again across thousands of years, to stay with something that needed help, even when staying cost them something, even when the animal couldn't say thank you.